Canada just pulled off one of its most confident power moves of the decade. Standing in northern British Columbia, Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled 6 nation-shaping megaprojects that, together, mark the biggest shift in Canadian economic strategy since the early days of Confederation. And while the announcement was aimed squarely at Canadians, the political aftershocks traveled instantly across the border. Donald Trump, who has spent his second term escalating tariffs and lecturing Ottawa on dependence, suddenly faced a Canada that wasn't retreating or reacting. It was building, boldly, loudly, and on its own terms.
Strategy is to develop new trade and economic corridors that help us diversify our markets and build our independence. The Northwest Corridor has extraordinary potential to unlock critical minerals development, clean power transmission, all under Indigenous leadership. The corridor involves building new transmission lines, upgrading highways, installing fiber and cell towers, and investing in communities, ports, and railways. By doing so, we'll strengthen our position as a global leader in clean energy and a leader in critical minerals.
Carney's announcement, delivered at a BC hydro facility, was nothing short of a national blueprint. He introduced a clean energy strategy built on rapid tax incentives, a new productivity superdeduction, and the Canada Infrastructure Bank's $10 billion commitment to push clean power projects forward. He made clear that nuclear energy, long stuck in political limbo, would now play a central role, with small modular reactors and utility-scale nuclear entering the mainstream of Canada's future grid. The Prime Minister then shifted northward, revealing that the Iqaluit Hydro Project is being formally referred to the Major Projects Office. This isn't just a power project, it's the first fully Inuit-owned hydro development in Canadian history. It's expected to eliminate nearly $2 billion in diesel use over the next half-century and establish a new foundation for Arctic sovereignty at a time when international interest in the North is rising sharply. Coming just months after Trump's renewed fascination with Arctic real estate and U.S. military expansion in Alaska, the symbolism was unmistakable. Carney moved west again, this time toward the Northwest Critical Conservation Corridor, a sweeping vision that blends Indigenous-led economic development with one of the largest conservation undertakings on the planet. The corridor will open long-blocked access to the Golden Triangle's mineral deposits, reinforce transmission networks, modernize remote highways, expand fiber and cellular access, and create new rail and port capacity. The conservation area tied to the plan would be as large as Greece, a direct statement that Canada is capable of balancing growth with stewardship. To make that possible, the Canada Infrastructure Bank announced a $140 million loan for the North Coast Transmission Line, a crucial piece of infrastructure that will unlock LNG production, support multiple mining projects, and anchor a clean energy industrial corridor stretching across northern British Columbia. Carney highlighted that this line alone could create $10 billion in economic activity and reduce emissions by up to 3 million tons annually. The Prime Minister then turned to the global competition for critical minerals. Demand for these resources, nickel, graphite, tungsten, copper, and dozens more, is expected to rise 5-fold by 2050. At the moment, production and processing are dangerously concentrated in one country, China. Carney made clear that Canada's geological wealth and political stability position it to become the world's most trusted supplier, especially as the United States struggles to stabilize its EV and industrial policies under Trump's unpredictable tariff regime. To accelerate this shift, Carney presented a new sovereign fund dedicated to critical minerals projects, a first and last mile infrastructure program, and expanded tax credits to help fast-track development. He highlighted 3 projects being sent to the Major Projects Office: Canada Nickel's Crawford Project in Ontario, Nouveau's Matawini Graphite Mine in Quebec, and Northcliffe's Sisson Tungsten Mine in New Brunswick. Each represents a pillar of a supply chain the world urgently needs. Crawford in particular, one of the largest nickel reserves globally, could set the benchmark for low-carbon, even carbon-negative mining. Carney concluded the event by connecting every project back to a larger narrative. Canada is entering a new era of nation-building, one defined by clean energy, northern sovereignty, Indigenous partnership, and economic independence rather than vulnerability to U.S. pressure. Carney's strategy lands at a moment when Donald Trump is relying on tariffs as the central tool of U.S. economic power. Washington has imposed sweeping duties across Canada's auto sector, steel, agriculture, lumber, and clean tech industries. But instead of playing defense, Carney is building the foundation of an industrial future that doesn't require America's permission. This is a structural counterpunch, one Trump did not expect. On Arctic sovereignty, the contrast is even sharper. The United States has increased northern deployments, revived long-dismissed discussions about controlling Greenland, and framed the Arctic as a strategic frontier. Carney's emphasis on an Inuit-owned hydro system wasn't accidental. It was a declaration that Canada intends to lead in its own north, not follow American priorities. Clean, local, and permanent energy infrastructure is far more powerful than any symbolic speech or diplomatic statement. It's sovereignty in physical form. On critical minerals, Canada is outpacing the United States in a race Washington claims to lead. Trump's tariffs on EV components were meant to drag investment back to American soil, but instead they've destabilized supply chains and discouraged automakers from committing to new facilities. Canada's approach, sovereign funds, long-term infrastructure, Indigenous equity, expedited permitting, and enormous grid expansions, looks like a country preparing for the next century, not the next election cycle. The U.S. remains dependent on global imports. Canada is positioning itself to become the supplier everyone else depends on. The Northwest Corridor adds another strategic layer. If completed, it allows Canada to ship minerals, energy, and manufactured goods directly to global markets through Pacific ports, without relying on American transit routes. This is the part that truly rattles Trump's worldview. His tariff strategy is built on one assumption, that Canada needs America more than America needs Canada. A fully developed northern corridor undermines that assumption entirely. The Indigenous ownership framework is an often overlooked but deeply consequential shift. By turning communities into shareholders rather than stakeholders, Carney is rewriting how Canada builds major projects. This stands in stark contrast to the U.S., where conflict between federal agencies and tribal nations often stalls development. Canada, under Carney's model, turns partnership into a competitive advantage. Finally, there's the national pride dimension. After years of reacting to tariffs, plant closures, and supply chain threats from Washington, Canada has been hungry for a moment that feels like forward motion. Carney's 6th project announcement captures that. It reframes the national conversation. Instead of worrying about Trump's next move, Canada is making its own.
Carney's 6 mega projects are more than infrastructure announcements. They're a statement of identity. They mark a Canada that is ready to build, ready to lead, and ready to assert its place in North America without asking for permission. Trump may escalate, Washington may push back, but something has shifted. For the first time in a long time, Canada isn't just responding to the world, it's shaping it. So, here's the question for viewers. Will these projects roll out fast enough to secure Canada's new position, or will Trump double down and try to pull the continent back into his orbit?
The federal government is hitting back at 2 big automakers. Ottawa calling it unacceptable that Stellantis and General Motors are both scaling back manufacturing in Canada, breaching its commitment. Ottawa is now trying to put pressure on them to back down by limiting the number of vehicles they can bring in from the U.S. tariff-free.
It started with a headline that sent shockwaves through North America's auto industry. Ottawa announced that it was cutting the number of American-made vehicles allowed into Canada without tariffs. Overnight, what once looked like a quiet trade exemption turned into a loud political statement. The decision came after 2 major U.S. automakers, Stellantis and General Motors, scaled back production in Canada. For years, both companies had enjoyed the privilege of importing cars from the United States tariff-free. That deal came with one condition: keep investing and building in Canada. When they failed to honor that promise, the Canadian government struck back. Ottawa's move isn't just about cars or trade figures, it's about drawing a line. In a region where the U.S. has dominated economic decisions for decades, Canada is finally saying, enough. What Trump once called an industrial revival for America has now triggered something far bigger, a political counterattack from the very ally he's been squeezing.
The details of Canada's decision reveal how carefully calculated it is. Starting this month, Stellantis will lose half of its duty-free import quota, while General Motors faces a 24% reduction. These exemptions were part of Canada's response to the 25% retaliatory tariff it imposed on U.S. vehicles after Trump's trade escalation. By scaling back those privileges, Ottawa isn't just reacting, it's redefining the rules of engagement. The government's message is simple. Companies that move production south of the border will pay more to sell in Canada. Officials say this is about fairness, not punishment. Canada invested over $105 million to modernize facilities in Ontario, including Brampton and Windsor, under the condition that automakers maintained their footprint. Instead, they shifted production to Illinois and halted electric van production in Ingersoll. That violated the agreement, and the government responded with precision. The brilliance of this move lies in its restraint. There are no shouting matches, no populist threats. Instead, Ottawa is fighting back with regulation, a trade weapon that's quiet, legal, and effective. It's not a tariff war. It's a policy chess match, and this time, Washington isn't the only one holding the board.
Behind this confrontation is the unmistakable shadow of Donald Trump's America First doctrine. His second-term agenda has pushed multinational companies to relocate manufacturing to the United States through a web of tariffs and incentives. On paper, it's a triumph. Jobs are returning to America, factories reopening, the industrial belt revived. But that same policy has set off a chain reaction north of the border. By forcing automakers to choose between American and Canadian production, Trump's strategy has cornered his closest trading partner. Canada, once pressured to comply, is now rewriting the rules. Instead of accepting Washington's dominance, Ottawa has used the moment to harden its own industrial identity. The government's new approach rewards loyalty and punishes flight, a model that mirrors Trump's tactics but serves Canadian interests. What was meant to make the U.S. stronger is now giving birth to a more assertive Canada. Trump's aggressive reshoring campaign didn't just change where cars are built, it changed how Canada sees itself in the global industrial race. The irony is striking. In trying to make America great again, Trump has awakened a neighbor that refuses to stay quiet or submissive. Canada has learned to fight back using the very instruments Trump relied on: policy, pressure, and pride.
Across Ontario, where factory closures have hit hardest, the mood has shifted from anger to determination. Unions and suppliers, usually divided by labor negotiations, now speak with one voice. They want accountability. They want production to stay in Canada. Public sentiment is equally firm. A nationwide poll released this month shows that 79% of Canadians worry about the future of the auto industry. 74% believe losing it would have a devastating impact on the national economy. Most strikingly, 2/3 of respondents, 67%, say they would boycott any company that moves its operations from Canada to the United States. For many Canadians, this isn't just about cars, it's about dignity. It's about whether their country will continue to build or merely extract and import. The government's decision to restrict duty-free access resonates deeply because it feels like a defense of national identity. Factories in Brampton and Ingersoll once symbolized the strength of Canada's manufacturing core. Now they stand as a reminder of what's at stake. And for the first time in years, workers, business owners, and policymakers are united around a single idea. Canada must control its own industrial future. That unity gives Ottawa leverage. It sends a clear signal to Trump's Washington. Political bullying may work elsewhere, but not here. Canada has found its footing and is willing to fight for every job, every investment, every plant that defines its industrial heart.
Ottawa's quota cuts are more than a technical policy change. They're a declaration of independence in a trade relationship long tilted toward the U.S. What began as a response to two automakers has evolved into a warning aimed straight at the White House. The message is unmistakable. If America wants to play hardball, Canada can too. Trump's trade strategy was designed to pull industry home, but it's now driving Canada to shield its economy with the same tools. Instead of folding under pressure, Ottawa has embraced its own version of industrial nationalism, disciplined, rules-based, and unapologetically firm.
The impact of this decision will ripple far beyond the auto sector. It challenges the assumption that the U.S. can dictate the pace of North American production. It also marks the beginning of a new era where Canada uses trade policy not just for defense, but for power projection. As the next round of trade talks looms in Washington, the balance of leverage is changing. Canada's actions have shown that it's not the silent partner in North America anymore. It's a country ready to define its own destiny, even if that means confronting its largest trading ally.
Trump's industrial crusade promised to restore America's dominance. Instead, it has united Canadian workers, galvanized their government, and reshaped an industry once thought dependent on U.S. goodwill. The tables have turned. Ottawa is no longer asking for leniency. It's setting the terms. And in doing so, it's turned Trump's greatest economic weapon into a mirror, one that reflects his own policy back at him. In the end, what began as a trade pressure campaign may go down as the moment Canada found its industrial voice. Trump wanted to make America stronger again. What he didn't expect was to make Canada stronger too.